the latest edition of Off the Top Rope. Yes, those boffins in Off the Ball have allowed us mess around with video cameras and Skype calls and do our own wrestling video podcast. My name is Richie McCormack. I'm joined by Will O'Callaghan. We are the two resident grappling nerds of the Off the Ball office, and we will aim to run you through pretty much all the TV and news that there is to squeeze into a week. Hopefully once weekly, maybe twice weekly. This is definitely proof of the latter as we look at Raw, as we did the other night. And tonight we're going to be looking at the twin double shot combo that is Wednesday night's AEW Dynamite and WWE's offering NXT. Will, good evening to you.
Good evening, Richie. I think we've been a little bit optimistic on week one. That's kind of 10 hours of wrestling that now have been completed over the last 3 days. I really feel for people who do this full time and have to do full reviews of each show and have to do 4 a week. The reality is there is just far too much wrestling on TV right now. Yeah,
but you see, the thing about it is the likes of Meltzer and Wade Keller and John Pollock and Wade Ting and all the others, they essentially make a career out of doing it. We're doing this for the goodness of our hearts for the other casual wrestling fans or big wrestling fans that might be also visitors to offtheball.com or to our YouTube channels or whatever. So yeah, fitting in, as I found today, 2 wrestling shows in one day is a lot to ask, especially when you've got another life going on and you've got other work to do. But yeah, I managed to get through what I could get through. And yeah, let's see what we make it all. Before actually we crack on, the good news today that actually broke was that we found out, I posted a story last night on offtheball.com as we record this, that it looked like it was shaky ground for NXT UK TakeOver Dublin, the biggest and worst mouthful this side of some questionable tapes in your dad's library. But we found out that it's going to be rearranged for, I think it's October, which is great news. So we're going to get in the autumn that long vaunted pay-per-view for Dublin. The only slight mishap that might surround it is, I think somebody pointed out that it is likely to be on the same weekend as OTT's anniversary show. Yeah. So quite what that would do for the likes of Mustache Mountain, who are booked for both, I think, Scrapper Mania and this.
Probably Tony Storm as well.
Tony Storm was another one as well. And there are others that will cross over too. Hopefully there aren't too many crossovers and the David Starr thing doesn't become a massive issue and we can actually get to enjoy 2 deadly shows. Fingers crossed anyway.
Yeah, I hadn't actually realised that, and then I was thinking, I was actually at the anniversary show the year just gone by, and that was the last weekend of October as well. I was kind of a bit like you. I was just relieved when I saw, because we both had tickets bought for the TakeOver show in Dublin, is that I was thinking it was just going to be cancelled and probably left at that stage, because they had some good names booked. And I mean, Walter was due to defend his title. We saw in the graphic that went up today, they were going to have Finn Balor, who was set to be announced. We were all kind of suspecting that was going to happen. Jordan Devlin, who is currently the Cruiserweight champion, we'll see if he still has gold around his waist when we get round to the end of October. Mustache Mountain, as you mentioned as well. And a lot of the indies who probably would have worked for OTT over the last couple of years as well were on that poster. So it will be very interesting to see if there's going to be a scheduling conflict. I really feel for OTT. I know we mentioned earlier this week that they lost Scrapper Mania because realistically that was the best card they had ever put together. To pack Moxley, David Starr on the one card as well, that would have been absolutely huge. So I'm still hoping they'll be able to reschedule that probably later in the year as well. And I think there's been a good outreach of love and support from the OTT community as well. A lot of people decided when they got their money back, look, I'll throw a bit of money into On Demand, or I'll buy a t-shirt, or I'll do something to try and help the wrestlers and the company out. So there's been a lot of goodwill towards the company in the last while as well.
I've never seen so many requests from people either on their Facebook page or on Twitter or whatever, responding saying, listen, I don't want my refund, you can keep the money, it'll probably do you more good than it will me, so hold on to it. So fingers crossed for all the backers and organisers of OTT that they are able to get back out there and to let their performers perform. But if you're missing your OTT fixture, if you're missing your Irish Wrestling fix, by the way, and I know there are a lot of Keep Fit videos doing the rounds and home PE things and all that kind of thing, just look up Session Mott Martinez Keep Fit videos at the moment. They are an inspiration to us all. If you want to learn how to lift a can properly without straining yourself, Will, if you want to learn how to lie out in the sun, those are the kind of things that she's looking after, the proper lazy man's workouts.
Nice. Now she's really good value. I think as she builds her way probably through the American and Japanese scene now, given that she's, I guess, moved up in those circles as well, I think her promo work and what she does in social media is going to be absolutely crucial. She's got a really good character. She's very inventive in terms of what she puts on social media as well, and I get the feeling that she's going to be a really big female star over the next couple of years.
Fingers crossed for her. Shall we crack into AEW Dynamite first of all today?
Yeah, I think the one thing I picked up from this week, from watching the amount of wrestling that we have, having gone through Raw on Monday night and then having watched both the AEW and NXT shows this week, I thought AEW won the week across the three. A really good wrestling show. We kind of were bemoaning the lack of actual wrestling on Raw. Well, this was a
Yeah,
complete antidote to that, because we got good matches, particularly a very long one between Guevara and also Kenny Omega. I thought it was a really good match, half an hour I think altogether.
nothing on it. Yeah.
And the rest of the matches across the board were pretty good. I mean, we had a couple of squashes, which you understand they're trying to put Jake Hager, the former Jack Swagger, over, and Brodie Lee, now the former Luke Harper, is coming in, getting a massive push in AEW on the back of being named the Exalted One. And they've really gone for a big push for those two. But aside from that, I thought they did a really good job of actually making all the wrestlers who were in ring look really good. And then we had a pretty interesting confrontation. If you're a broken Matt Hardy fan, you're going to really enjoy that the Matt Hardy of TNA is back in AEW. If you don't like him, you're probably going to switch off the last 12 minutes of this show. But I really enjoyed seeing Chris Jericho cut a promo on a drone.
Yeah, we'll get to that, but yeah, we saw the Open. Tony Schiavone was joined at the desk by Cody Rhodes and Kenny Omega, and we got what we don't get anymore. We get a proper rundown of the show, the majority of which was matches, and I was like, yes, this is how it should be. Now, I'm not exactly comfortable with the chumminess of having Omega and Cody on the mic. I'm sure there are obviously reasons for that, travel restrictions, etc., etc. JR couldn't be there, Excalibur couldn't be there, Taz couldn't be there. But Shivani, bless his heart, he absolutely still has it. I know Court Bauer and MLW not necessarily took a punt, but I don't think he was thought of as that top tier commentator anymore, like he had been when he was with WCW, and even in his last few days with WCW, he wasn't arse. Like the company was dreadful, but it's great to see him back there and actually making an effort. We get Cody and Jimmy Havoc first off. Havoc is one of these people I've never really bought. I don't know about you. He's generic deathmatch indie wrestler type B, and there was a movement about him in the ring. I was like, he can't really walk properly across this ring. I'm not one to there was a clunkiness about him that I just think stood out for me, especially somebody next to Cody, who's not like Cody's not exactly Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat, but there's a polish to him that there isn't about Jimmy Havoc, and Havoc's been knocking around for a while now, and he should be a little bit better than he has been. There was a little bit of damning with faint praise as well when they said he's a staple of AEW Dark, and I was like, it might stay that way. But yeah, it was a fairly simple, like Cody gave Havoc plenty, including letting him grab his tongue and uppercut him. But ultimately we saw Cody getting a Muta-like running lariat back into the ring. There was a reverse suplex off the ropes, crossroads ×2 from Cody, and he picked up the win, which is fairly straightforward and expected from him. Then we got a message from Jake Roberts. What have you made of the Jake Roberts return to AEW so far?
Yeah, like I really enjoyed his opening promo. He added a little bit of intrigue as well, because then Cody was in this kind of unusual place in the card. I'll admit this is probably the first time I've ever sat down and watched the 2 hours plus of Dynamite in one single sitting. Usually I kind of consume AEW by watching highlights of what's happening, try and just keep along with the product, and I've watched their pay-per-views, which I found very enjoyable so far. I mean, look, again, this is another good Jake Roberts promo. They have him kind of sitting fireside for this. Cody's just after coming off the match with Havoc, and he's basically pleading. It's like, just give us one chance. We just want one match. And like, he's there as the hype man for Lance Archer. We don't get to see Lance Archer in this promo either. It's just Jake directly speaking down the Titantron to Cody Rhodes. Look, again, Jake the Snake is still one of the best promos around. He's really good at this kind of dark stuff. I do wonder what's going to happen though once they face off, because the feeling is that probably a week, 2 weeks time, you're going to get Cody Rhodes against Archer, and at that point, if say Cody Rhodes was to get a victory, where does that leave Jake the Snake Roberts? It's unusual, but they're able to draw on the kind of lineage and history of wrestling as well, which Cody Rhodes is a total mark for, as much as we are. By continually Jake the Snake Roberts bringing up, your dad, bringing up Arn Anderson is around. He's saying you can bring any of them out. We just need a chance, Caesar. Give me a chance. So yeah, again, I thought a pretty good vignette. It moves the storyline along quite well as well, and I would agree with you on the Jimmy Havoc side. I think I've always seen him as a hardcore brawler. They tried a few times on commentary, aside from that probably unintentional burn by saying he's been very impressive on Dark, is that they brought up that he actually maybe has a bit more about his game here, but I wasn't totally convinced about his wrestling style. I think Cody Rhodes was actually very, very accommodating during the match to him. Again, look, he came out looking reasonably strong in his defeat to Cody Rhodes, but that's what Cody has been doing for the best part in the company. We'll maybe look at that in a wider sense, that maybe Cody Rhodes should be pushing himself more as a star, because obviously he has booking responsibilities as part of this as well. And I think just, you know, again,
he can't though. That's the thing. Like as soon as I was worried when this thing was formed that this would be, and I think everybody was, that it would be basically the elite running the show, that Cody would book himself into being the champion from the jump, that Omega would be putting on these 5-star clinics pretty much every night, and that the Young Bucks would be out being spot monkeys, you know, on the semi finale. But like, it hasn't happened that way, and I think they've actually been patient, and they haven't necessarily used themselves brilliantly, which has been to their detriment. But on the other hand, it's actually been to the company's detriment that they haven't pushed the actual owners of the company down everybody's throat from the get-go. I think they've kind of done it the right way, which is to be applauded. We saw that Cody saying that Lance is going to debut next week. He's offering up a spoiler. That was one of the things that kept getting to me during the course of the match, was that, or the course of the show, was it can seem still a bit chummy. And I know there's no one there, and the tenor and the pallor of the show is slightly different because there's no crowd. But it seems there's a lot of little in-jokey bits and pieces still knocking around AEW that I think they need to work out, that might turn the casual fan off. Like, it's one of these things we were always told in radio. It's like, make sure that everybody that's listening can, you know, understand the joke or whatever, because if it's just between two people, then people are just going to go, what are they talking about? And then not really invest in it. If you get your casual viewer who might be flicking between NXT or might be a new viewer, and it comes across that kind of stuff, I don't think it goes over all that well. But, you know, it seems to be working for them so far. They're, you know, doing okay. They're bringing in the likes of Jake Roberts, which can re-attract those casual fans. Roberts' promos work better in front of crowds, though. The taped thing loses that little bit of frisson, like that sense of the couple of weeks ago when he was in front of that audience. And again, they can't help it at the moment, but where he was almost goading Cody, like, you're like, he still has that magic. Like, you still look at those promos he's cutting as heel Jake Roberts in '92 in around and late '91, and you're still thinking, man, he is still, that's there. But I think it needs to be in front of a crowd. Otherwise, the sitting in the campfire thing reminded me of, I don't know if you remember the Blackjacks promo that they had, kind of introducing them in the late 90s, where they repackaged Wyndham and Bradshaw. They had Blackjack Lanza sitting around a campfire and talking and telling tales about what him and Blackjack Mulligan used to get up to. And you're like, I was like, two old dudes sitting by a campfire with a mustache talking about new people who were going to do their bidding. I was like, a bit close. But that's just me. That like 99% of people wouldn't spot that. But as you mentioned there, like, bell to bell, brilliant. And kind of proof of that next is when we get Darby Allin and Kip Sabian. Nice little promo package. Another little thing that actually was brilliant, a preview video from Darby Allin saying Kip Sabian will be a sacrifice for the sins of the Inner Circle. They're basically giving a reason for a nothing match. And I was like, yes, this is like, you're explaining why, like, we wouldn't have put these two together before the night. They are, okay, why are they fighting? This is why. And you're like, all right, that's grand. I'll buy into this.
Yeah, I think that was a good contrast. I mean, obviously I watched this pretty soon after I watched NXT this afternoon, and that's something that did stand out, is that they basically put stakes on everything. And it's one of the good things about the record, which comes up on their little card before they come out as well. And the commentary team, and I agree with you about the fact they're too chummy, and it started badly when, at the start, Tony basically goes, I'm a member of the Elite. And the guys, instead of kind of putting him down, they're like, yeah, of course you are, Tony, we love you. It's kind of, you needed a heel out there, I think, as opposed to having Cody Rhodes and Omega on commentary all night. But when you come back to the point about just kind of setting everything up, they're really clever. They put up their overall record, and they also have this seasonal record for the calendar year.
For 2020, yeah.
And they were really good, I thought, even when it came to pretty nothing matches, where they'd say, hey, this guy's 2-7 for the year, but he's won his last two, so he's going for 3 in a row. So for absolutely no reason, there might be no storyline reason as to why the two guys are facing each other, they were very good at actually making a point that, oh, wait, if he wins this, he's actually in contention to go for a title. It's a very clever way of keeping people invested in matches that really shouldn't matter.
And it's good little things like actually naming the referee before the match starts as well. And it's not just, confined to Aubrey Edwards. It was throughout the night. I was like, yes, tiny little things like that make all the difference. One question that Cody asked during the course of this match with Kip Sabian, that he gets young Sting vibes from Darby Allin. Is that something you're picking up?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I've heard a few people kind of say this. I mean, obviously, they're linked by the face paint. They're linked by their moveset is not too dissimilar either between the two. I mean, again, I thought like Kip Sabian did a good job of making Darby Allin look quite good in this match as well. I mean, ultimately, he wins after getting the Last Supper. I thought, again, it was a pretty good showing by both wrestlers. They did a good job of getting both over. One thing that really stood out in the middle of this as well was the botch when they went to go to an ad break, which I thought Cody Rhodes did a fantastic job of covering for. So Tony Schiavone went to throw to an ad break about maybe 8 or 9 minutes into the match. He wasn't meant to, because they were starting to transition into the final stages of the match. And because there's no crowd there, you could actually hear the relay of whoever was giving instructions from gorilla position into Tony's ear.
No, I'll tell you what that is. They run the ad break action live on Fight TV, which is like a subscription online thing in the States. I think you're able to do it here. I'm not sure if it's geo-blocked. But yeah, while it goes to break on TNT, they continue on. That's something that JR has been stung for a few times, by the way. You're able to find botch videos out there where JR keeps talking in JR way about stuff. And this is something JR is notorious for. There's a video doing the rounds I saw last week. I think it was Richard Land tweeting it. If you're not following him, you should. He had a video of it was a UWF show, and it was Michael Hayes and JR on commentary, and they're like doing their professional calling the match kind of shtick while they're on air. It cuts to break, and they have the in-break audio from the two of them, and the two of them are just like effing and jeffing the whole way through as a joke. And then as soon as the green light's back on, they're back to being pros again. I was like, yes, that's exactly what it's pretty much like what we're like off air and off the ball.
Pretty much.
You not believe some of the stuff that goes on in the office, and
we
then
always
on air and we're all nice and pally.
Exactly, but we always kind of assume, though, particularly when you're in a microphone position and you've got a headset mic on, you have to assume that there's the possibility they might come back and we are live. But I thought it was quite clever by I thought it was quite clever by Cody though as well, because again, he set it up nicely that look, if this is a mistake, it's like, oh, you nearly saw a fall happen during the break. You never know in AEW, when we cut away, a match could end, which I thought was actually quite a clever moment from Cody Rhodes. And again, he's got a great mind for the industry. I think he's really, really clever at that kind of stuff, and I think you can tell he's definitely one of the big creative brains behind the product within the ring as well.
Yeah, there was a nice little Bill Watts reference in that. But this is a great outing from Darby Allin, I thought. Really sets up both men nicely, shows what Penelope Ford can offer as a valet for Kip Sabian. Didn't make him look like a chump by any means. And we saw a Last Supper from Darby to pick up the 3. After that, we got a Jake Hager video package, which included his Bellator exploits, and was all the better for that. Some poor schmo called Chico Adams is waiting in the ring. Again, this is just a squash. It was a choke slam into a triangle kind of sleeper, and Hager picks up the win. Looked a bit gassed in doing it, which is a bit of a worry if you're going to get a long match, particularly one with John Moxley. Moxley came out with the belt. Afterwards, they got involved in a brawl. We saw the double arm DDT from Moxley, and Hager recovered into an ankle lock to show that, hey, I won't be put down by your best move, which is good stuff as well.
And then very quickly he was made to look crappy then when he had to run away from the ring. I know it was a little bit heelish, but they definitely made John Moxley look a lot stronger, particularly when they came back the far side of the break, and Moxley got to cut kind of an unanswered promo saying, hey, next time we actually get in the ring, you're going to need a stretcher to leave. You're not going to get a chance to walk away.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how they go language-wise with all these promos, by the way. Jericho's later on is definitely one of them, but when you see Moxley calling Hager, you gruesome son of a bitch. There was countless sons of bitches in this one, and there was a bunch of I think bitches, as well on Raw the other night. Heyman was definitely guilty of a couple of things, but yeah, it's nice to see that they're kind of loosening up to it a great, I guess. So once it's not overused, is always the issue. A recap then of Brodie Lee's unveiling as the Exalted One, the Dark Order. We then get a scene where Brodie Lee is badly cutting up a steak. Let's not make no bones about it. And he's joined by 2 members of the Dark Order, who he then chastises as children. One of them for eating before he'd finished, and then the other for sneezing, which in this time of COVID-19 is obviously a concern, even for the Exalted One of the Dark Order. These kind of pre-filmed segments where they act like there isn't a camera there, what do you make of them?
Yeah, to be honest, I thought this was a little bit kind of smarky, this whole segment, because it's a very thinly veiled cut at Vince McMahon, who understandably the former Harper and now Brodie Lee had issues with, because apparently Vince McMahon didn't like that he couldn't do a southern accent, which was a problem when he was hanging around with Bray Wyatt, and then it kind of held him back in terms of his push after his Intercontinental run in the Fed. He never really got back up to those levels again. He was always very much in the mid card, and then got associated back in. But obviously the Vince McMahon reference there is the sneezing. Apparently Vince McMahon, a kind of famous story that went around, hated if he wasn't able to control that he was able to sneeze himself, and he'd have a massive issue if someone was sneezing in a meeting or something like that. So there's an obvious payoff there.
I love that. I love that Vince story. He gets angry at himself if he sneezes. It's just like it's amazing stuff. That man is a freak.
But yeah, I mean, aside from that, look, again, I suppose it allowed a little bit of tone having some of these pre-taped vignettes in there. But yeah, I wasn't sure on this one, to be honest. Again, I'm not 100% sure. We'll see how things go about how Brodie Lee is going to be as a kind of a talker and as a leader within the Dark Order here. Like, I was pretty sure when we heard there was going to be a leader of this group, it was probably going to be Matt Hardy. In a way, I'm quite happy that Matt Hardy is back doing his Broken Brilliance thing, and that this gives a chance for Brodie Lee to be pushed as a real threat. And I mean, that followed up with a match which was an absolute squash on his debut. But again, he was made to look really, really strong. They're getting over the Dark Order idea that these guys are going to prey on the weak. The only problem is, Richie, as well, I kind of wonder about the motivation when you say that all we're going to do is go and take the weak out in AEW. That doesn't exactly strike me as we're going to walk up and be an issue for the Inner Circle or for the Elite.
What I didn't get either at the end of it is QT Marshall, who Cody attempts to put over at the start by saying he's underrated, he's a friend of mine.
And my best mate,
he's just gotten a hair transplant, which is taken really well. The evidence of that wasn't really on show, to be fair. But like, this is a squash. He got some offense in, not a lot, and it's fair enough. Again, you're trying to set up Brodie as a threatening character. But by the end of it, they leave a mask on Marshall's chest and they're like, is it an offer to join? And I'm there thinking, if it is an offer to join, why would it be? You've just shown that this lad can be put away on somebody's debut inside 3 minutes. Why on earth would you want him as part of your group? He's clearly a chump.
And there's a big risk here as well, Rich, that we might end up in a situation where, like, I'm usually a fan of having stables. I think they can be really good to elevate people, and we'll talk about Sammy Guevara a bit later on. But there is a risk that AEW might become just dominated by stables as well. Like, we just saw so many different offers over the last couple of weeks on AEW about people joining different factions as well. I'm hoping they don't overdo that. Like, I think it's absolutely fine having two factions as they do now, particularly at the top of the card. The Elite against the Inner Circle makes perfect sense. Most of your big stars are inside those two groups as well. But this idea of having kind of a mid-card group, it reminds me of Corbin in WWE and his kind of mid-card vortex of evil that he had at one stage as well. If you're going to recruit people in, you got to try and recruit the best people. As you say, you don't want to be recruiting a guy who has been easily put away in 3 minutes. I'm not exactly sure what QT Marshall is going to add to the party if he was to join the Dark Order. And also, he just doesn't fit the Dark Order either.
No, I don't think it's a genuine offer or whatever. I think it was just this is here we are and this is what we can do kind of signal. But again, the main vibe I get, and especially from the pre-tape stuff, and especially from the fact that they're kind of almost interchangeable, the little underlings in the Dark Order. Do you remember like the Aces and Eights angle in TNA?
Oh God, which probably killed one of the golden periods of TNA as well. Again, just Aces and Eights just got way too big.
It was dumb by the end of it, and all the pre-tapes were dumb, and you're like, oh God. And a lot of the little younger people like Wes Briscoe and all that were completely interchangeable, and it's just that's the kind of vibe that I'm getting off this, and it's something they really need to try and avoid and at least be aware of if they're going to head down that route. But as you say, the factions thing is too great. You've got the Elite, the Dark Order, you've got the Inner Circle. Presuming Jake is going to add to Lance Archer, you may have more on top of that, and then
Christopher Daniels has a crew as well.
Christopher Daniels has a crew, and you're kind of like, there's a little bit of, and they're all kind of have little bits of similarities between each other. Like the darkness stuff can stretch to Matt Hardy. The fact that we talked about him possibly being the Exalted One is case in point of that. And similarly, you're kind of going, what's the difference maker with Lance Archer and Jake and the Dark Order? Like, why are they two different entities when they kind of seem similar? It's something that they'll need to delineate fairly quickly and find where the lines are, because if they don't, they could, as you say, be in trouble with that. We get a recap then of Matt Hardy's arrival last week. Says the inner circle must be broken and deleted. An update on the fitness of Mac Jackson, 61%, according to Vanguard 2.0. And then we get the main event of the night, I guess. Sammy Guevara out to challenge Kenny Omega for the AAA Mega Championship. Brilliant little, I guess, a synopsis of what Guevara can do in the ring and where he's possibly going as a performer himself in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, look, this is the best match of the week by a distance. Again, I think they're really good at getting across their relationships that they have with other promotions as well. Like earlier, they were mentioning that Jake Hager is the Lucha Underground lineal champion. In this case, Kenny Omega is carrying the AAA. They're creative in terms of how they get this across. Yeah. The only thing that seems a bit weird is that Kenny Omega feels a little bit less special going into this match in a way because he's been on commentary all night. And it even seemed a little bit weird that we had Cody go directly from the booth at the start to run down the card to actually walk through the tunnel and come down the very short runway to actually come in for the first match. And then he was back in commentary by the end of the next break. And in the case of Omega, he was pretty much in the commentary booth with Tony all night up to the point that he wrestles in this, and he's involved in the schmozzle after the final segment of the show as well. So it's a bit weird. It seems almost a bit too reliant on the two guys being involved. But Omega's great. I mean, look, he's able to get a match out of a broom. He's able to get a match out of a blow-up doll. He'll easily get a match out of Sammy Guevara. But maybe we kind of, and I know I'm definitely guilty of this, I think I underrated Sammy Guevara a little bit at the start. I thought when initially Chris Jericho was setting up his faction that, Sammy was going to be a little bit of comic relief in terms of this, and they were having that fun about him being a Spanish god and the most beautiful guy around and whatever else. But
he'd be the whipping boy that essentially the faces would knock the shit out of him, and then they come along and kind of prove their point, etc. But no, he's actually a fantastic little performer in his own right, and very charismatic for somebody as young.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a huge upside. I think he's going to be a big star in this company. And again, I like the fact that we didn't have a situation whereby Jericho and the guys come out around the ring when Sammy Guevara is involved in this match. This was allowed to basically run off as a main event in and of itself, and it meant that Guevara looked all the stronger because his mates aren't there around ringside during the match. Again, he's made to look really strong. It takes V-Trigger and then the One-Winged Angel from Omega at the end to put him away. Again, I think you get to a point where you have to think, when are they going to make Omega the face of this company? Because you'd imagine that Jon Moxley probably has a reasonably long run. They were pretty determined to give Jericho in the best part of a year with the title to kind of establish it at the start. And now you would imagine that Jon Moxley probably goes something similar, you would think. Given that there's lots of potential rivalries for Moxley, they're going to feel fresh and new. But I can't help but feel that it's only surely a matter of time before Omega goes to the very top of this card, because he's the best wrestler they have in the company by a distance.
We then got Jericho out. One of the cameramen, in the absence of the crowd, sings his entrance theme Judas for Jericho. Funny, Jericho holds the camera, which was pretty funny. Jericho says the arrogant sons of bitches got Matt Hardy to join the Elite. He's going to give Matt Hardy the chance to make the right decision and join the Inner Circle. As you mentioned, then he begins cutting a promo on a drone, calling the drone a piece of shit, but then asks the drone to join the Inner Circle. I'm like, oh, okay. Then we get Matt Hardy in the upper deck, then in the middle deck, then the right, then the left, then bouncing all around as we kind of see the jump cuts that they've done, but they say it's some psychic abilities that Hardy has.
And he's magic, apparently.
Yeah, well, clearly we can see Jericho kind of move between one of the camera shots, but anyway, that's between here and there. Says he's magic, and Jericho says Matt is impressive, but wants to explain that it's his show. The reason I assisted the Elite, says Matt, is because I owed the Books of Youth a death. AEW represents freedom, is my Arcadia, says Matt. And he doesn't want Matt to join the Elite, does Jericho. He wants him to join the Inner Circle. Back and forth that I think went on too long.
It was lengthy. I think 13 minutes. I think this kind of clocked in the end. And I think this could have been particularly when you're going to end with a schmoz at the end of it anyway, I think this could have ended a bit more quickly. It's kind of weird timing as well, because Matt Hardy was on Jericho's podcast, I think, last week as well, which is kind of unusual timing. I'm sure Jericho just wanted to make the most of the fact that Matt Hardy had just signed for AEW, but for them to have had kind of two confrontations now in as many weeks as well. Like, Jericho is excellent fun. The fact that he's on the Britney mic, as you mentioned, his is getting the cameraman to sing his theme while Jericho is turning the camera around on him was quite entertaining. I think whether you like this stuff or not is going to be largely down to how much you enjoy Broken Matt Hardy. Like, I enjoy the Broken Universe. I enjoy all the kind of nonsense around it. We need relief in wrestling and a break away from serious things from time to time. And I find Matt Hardy really funny. But if you don't find him entertaining, I would imagine these segments are going to become painful really, really quickly, because they've gone back to the kind of the face Matt Hardy, who's just going to be fun. I actually thought it would have been an interesting swerve when he came into AEW if it seemed like he was going to join the Elite, because everyone is very familiar that he's quite good mates with the guys who run the company here, and then if it turned out that he was actually turning on them to join the Inner Circle. But it seems fairly unlikely that's going to happen. I think they're setting this up certainly for Blood and Guts when it comes around, that it's going to be effectively two factions against each other. We're looking at faction warfare here in what's essentially going to be a War Games match, and it would be War Games if they weren't able to call it. If they were able to call it that, unfortunately, I think the trademark was picked up by WWE last year at some point. So Blood and Guts is the new War Games.
I wonder if they got the kind of roofed cage that nearly caused Brian Pillman to have his neck broken by Sid. But I think that's a possibility. I think that's something that could work in their favor if they manage to do that.
Yeah, look, again, I think they have to do something to separate themselves here. I think they will definitely try and get something that doesn't look like the War Games that NXT ran a couple of times now in the last couple of years.
Painful.
Yeah.
Painful stuff, that.
And look, I enjoyed the cage that they put together a few weeks ago, and we saw Cody do his moonsault from the top as well. So there's going to be great workers across that pay-per-view, and particularly there's fantastic workers in both the Elite and also in the Inner Circle as well. I think they make this show particularly interesting, and again, I just think from a purely star power point of view, Richie, they've been really good at getting their top guys out on these shows. A bit like we were talking about on Raw during the week as well. I think they were quite clever on the production side of things as well. They used a lot of close-up shots on the wrestlers when they were inside the ring. They had their hard cam obviously set facing against a very small set piece behind the ring, so everything kind of looked big and exaggerated during it as well. And they only a few times, I think when Sammy came out, he jokingly had all the kind of pictures of the Elite were set up kind of ringside as well, and he pretended to go over and converse with them. But aside from that, they kind of made very little of the fact that the stadium was empty as well, and I think that actually probably helped the show just to kind of tick along. Obviously this final segment finishes off with a standoff in the ring where ultimately, you know, the Elite end up coming in to defend Matt Hardy. Matt Hardy had made the point to Jericho as well. He's like, you are known as Judas and the Judas effect. I knew Judas in my previous form, and there's no way I'm going to join a guy who'll very quickly turn on me. So they're setting it up very clearly. That's like, look, the Elite are here for Matt Hardy, and his decision is very firmly in their camp as we face towards their kind of pay-per-view in a few weeks' time, which is going to be in front of an empty crowd.
Sequencing wise, I can see why they did it, because they want to end the show with the Elite standing tall. But I could have done with those two segments, i.e. this and the Guevara and Omega match being switched, finish off with a match, not have this sequence be as long because it felt too long. And yeah, one glaring thing by the end of it as well, and it's something that AEW have struggled with big style since their launch. On this show, during the course of the 2 hours, as far as I know, the only two women that appeared were Brandy Rhodes on announcing and Penelope Ford as a valet. Like, no women's, but like, that's a glaring problem in the year of our Lord 2020, when even, you know, Big Vinny on the other side has three separate, I guess if you can, NXT now, and women's divisions all have their little things going on, loads of different programs going on. They're not just a throwaway anymore. They're not just a battle royal at WrestleMania. There's going to be 3, 4, 5, 6 matches maybe involving women over the course of next weekend. Like, it's poor form at this stage. I know possibly they don't have the roster to do it yet, but I think they need to be. It's not as if you hear rumors of, oh, they're out to sign this independent worker, or they're out to sign this person from Stardom, or they're out to sign this free agent. It's very, very quiet. There's no buzz about it. There's no sense that you're going to see something great from them in the women's department anytime soon.
It's an Achilles heel, Richie. There's no doubt it's an Achilles heel. Like, they started off, I think, with a poor enough women's division in terms of their recruitment as well. It's almost like it felt like an afterthought, and I know AEW were trying to fit an awful lot of things into a very short period of time, so it was like trying to get pay-per-views ready before they went to TV, then getting the TV deal and trying to get the TV shows out, and then working through one or two other major pay-per-views. So they have been learning as they go along, and not to use that as an excuse, but I guess it is a bit of a mitigating factor. But any of the women's matches that I've seen in AEW so far as well are well below the standard of women that are being recruited into WWE. And we'll talk about NXT in a moment, but this is kind of a stark contrast where AEW have nothing happening in their women's division currently, while NXT are setting up effectively an 8-person tournament to eventually create a ladder match with 6 participants, which will then be there to set up a number 1 contender to take on Rhea Ripley or Charlotte Flair at the end of it. So when you consider that NXT is the development division on WWE, and they've got that kind of depth that they've got 8 to 10 wrestlers who can actually be in the championship picture, it's a huge contrast compared to what AEW have been doing so far. And I actually think a lot of the AEW women's matches have been pretty clunky, and I would put a lot of that down to very poor recruitment when they were starting. At a time when they probably could have plucked people from Japan, they could have probably plucked some of the talents across from Impact Wrestling as well. They didn't do so, and to me that seems directly that they were deciding to recruit and focus elsewhere in their roster to start.
Like, all they have to do is like like, she's got her problems and people are necessarily like hating her because of the alleged racist stuff, but like Tessa Blanchard is somebody who sticks out like a sore thumb in terms of somebody that seemed very gettable. It's not as if I'd imagine TNA contracts are that binding or watertight at the moment.
Yeah, I'd imagine,
and she's
like,
still doing her indie stuff. Like,
Tessa Blanchard would have been an easy get. I'd imagine Chelsea Green would have been an easy get when she was available. She's now gone to WWE as well. They were wrestlers you could have probably brought in and maybe kind of work your women's division around that, but it's not the way they went. They went with a few talents from Japan who I think the guys at the top of the company knew already, one being, of course, Kenny Omega's girlfriend, and then they went that way, and then of course the accusation was quickly made that's like Omega has now put the belt directly onto his girlfriend's waist, and that didn't go down too well, and they had a few kind of botchy matches starting off too, and they've got off on the wrong foot definitely in the women's division. It's one thing if AEW are going to be successful in 2020, and like I think the program, again, after watching NXT and Raw this week, is generally a breath of fresh air by comparison, and it's probably a little bit closer to my taste in terms of what I enjoy in wrestling. But I'd be with you that they have to put a real focus onto improving their women's division, and probably pretty quickly as well.
On to NXT then, I guess. We got that opening high package of the conclusion, thank God, of Gargano and Ciampa, two people who, like, everybody obviously enjoyed their work before they got to NXT. People enjoyed their work at the start of their run in NXT, and now I'm kind of going, why are you still working together? Please stop. But yeah, here we are.
The air's gone out of it, Richie. Unfortunately, this is the great storyline which was immaculately built over kind of 18 months, 2 years previously. If Ciampa hadn't got injured, and Ciampa got injured because they were rushed up onto the main roster because WWE panicked at the time as well, if Gargano and Ciampa had both been healthy last year, they could have blown off this feud perfectly at TakeOver New York, and we would have all moved on. I get the feeling after seeing the final segment as well that they're setting this up very nicely for Ciampa to win and for Gargano to go up to the main roster. I know they don't like the term call-up now at this stage,
anymore, yeah.
But this really strikes me that Gargano is now going to be put over as a dangerous heel, and that he's in all likelihood going to end up going to SmackDown or Raw. I would imagine SmackDown's probably a natural home for Johnny Gargano at the end of this, but they keep on using the phrase, I noticed this throughout the night in both the promo packages and also in terms of the back and forth between the guys in the ring with Triple H later as well, is that it's like NXT is no longer able to house both of us, so therefore one of us has to leave. And Ciampa, from a shoot point of view, has been very clear that he would prefer to go home and not work than work on the main roster. Now, whether that's him working people along the way, but the feeling seems to be that Ciampa would prefer to stay in NXT, stay living in Florida, work a much smaller schedule, not have to do house shows along the way, because he's very aware of the state of his neck at this point, and he knows that he has to probably rest up a bit more than some of the rest of the wrestlers. So I think they're very clearly signposting that DIY will actually genuinely finish their feud at the end of a couple of weeks' time, and then after that, this empty building match. How convenient that is in the current circumstances. That at that stage, I think Gargano finally gets his call up to the main roster, and we all have to forget that these two guys, when they were having a massive feud, became a face tag team on SmackDown and Raw at one point as well. I hope, look, Gargano is fantastic in ring. I prefer him as a face than this current Johnny Gargano kind of slightly mean character he has at the moment, but I'm really hoping that he gets a push when he goes up onto the main roster as well, because I think he can provide really good matches for people.
He can provide good matches to people, but I don't think he's going to be in any way pushed or at the top of a card, because I don't think he's a believable heel. And I think the face that they will try and make him on the main roster, particularly if he ends up somewhere like SmackDown under the tutelage of Bruce Pritchard and essentially Vince, then he's just gonna be wasted. He's gonna be that smiley, happy babyface like Chad Gable or something like that
I
they
think he
turn
could be
into
the
Shorty
the
G.
male Bailey. I mean, a guy who, like
Maybe.
Gargano 18 months ago, was like just ridiculously over. Johnny Wrestling, everyone was into him. He, not even after the Ciampa feud, he had like a great feud with Adam Cole over there,
Yeah.
3 big matches at takeovers as well. He was hugely, hugely over, even against Adam Cole, who is in a tweeny way is massively over at the same time as well. I just get the feeling that maybe he has the full sales support, but I reckon that when he ends up on the main roster, it could fall absolutely flat. I mean, they very quickly lost any kind of faith or interest from a fan point of view in Bailey once she went up to the main roster as well, because this really kind of white meat baby face, happy shtick dies very quickly, I think, when it comes to there. So he'll have to be very carefully managed when he goes up. I know Triple H has said many times, we have 6-month plans for everybody who goes up. That is not played out in reality when people make the move. We talked about Aleister Black on
You can have
Tuesday.
6 month plans all you want until you get in front of Vince. It's like, I hate it.
He's too small. This Gargano, he's small.
Who's this guy? I've got legs bigger than him. Yeah, no, it's all at Vince's whim, and essentially you could end up dying a death because of that. And that's the unfortunate position that a lot of these talents going to find themselves in. First match of the night: Austin Theory and Tyler Breeze. What you make of this one?
Yeah, it was okay. I mean, a very clear story coming into this, which is that Austin Theory is a former fan of Tyler Breeze. They kept on saying that when he was a teenager, he used to look up to him. He's stolen. I wasn't gathering where it was his own phone or Tyler Breeze's phone, because obviously Tyler Breeze's Prince Pretty character
With the selfie.
yeah, is all based around selfies and is all based around that. I kind of got the feeling he'd taken Tyler Breeze's phone because he said, here's a memory for you. So it was if like it's going to be on your own phone as opposed to being on his. Like, is he going to go back afterwards and send these to Tyler Breeze? I'm not quite sure. I thought, look, it was
Is it in iCloud?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, or maybe on Twitter, and you can read it there. It was a bit strange from that point of
No,
view.
it's in my DMs.
Yeah, but obviously, like a fairly clear narrative that they're trying to get across here, which is that the young heel is getting a bit too cocky, and he was dominating within the match, and then eventually hubris kicks in towards the end, and he's trying to take an extra selfie when he's setting up for his finisher, and Tyler Breeze is able to turn that around and get the victory. Obviously, I'm guessing this feud is probably going to go on, but the only thing that's kind of strange, Richie, I don't know how you feel about it, is that like Tyler Breeze in his current character, and I thought he was going to get a proper reboot when he went back to NXT from the main roster, is that he doesn't exactly look and feel like the old Prince Pretty at this stage. I mean, his hair is cut quite short. He is looking a little bit older at this point as well, and he's dressing himself down. It's almost like his character doesn't fit the kind of gritty look he has at the moment.
Yeah, they should probably do something to have him address that. And there's no harm in looking different than you did 5-6 years ago. God knows we all do.
Yeah.
But I think you have to match your character and certain aspects of your personality to match your look. And I think there's a bit of a disconnect. And for somebody who seemed to be so on top of his gimmick when he was there, and he was even, him and Bailey were, I think, two people who were essentially in roster coaches for a lot of the young people that were there, even though they were still quite young themselves. I remember seeing some backstage stuff from them both, and they were happy enough to teach people things. But it seems like he's kind of lost his way and is happy to be back in Florida doing the coconut loop and basically just helping out others on the roster and kind of making people. And if that's what he wants, yeah, fair enough. You might argue.
I think Fandango going back down Rich didn't help either. He just about got away from that, and next thing Fandango arrives back in NXT as well, which kind of killed his slightly stunted run that he was having when he got back down, and he's very quickly fallen back down towards the bottom of the card. He almost feels again like an enhancement talent. He's gone from being an enhancement talent and a bit of a comedy goof on the main roster to just feeling like an enhancement talent now down in NXT. But again, he's the type of guy who I think you could put him in the mid card or even to the upper mid card just from a wrestling point of view, and he could have really good matches with quite a few people here who were in the NXT roster. But this is a pretty nothing match. The only one thing that was interesting, again, we talk about the empty arena, very clearly in this match they realised that there's nobody here, so therefore we can talk smack as much as we want and it's going to get picked up on the camera, and they were very clearly making use of that. And I think we see that probably a lot during the card as well, because I think the wrestlers a couple of weeks ago, when they first had the week in front of the empty crowd, they weren't quite sure what to do, and they were very quiet, presumably because they were worried that the calls were going to get picked up on camera. And now I think they're trying to reverse that around. Even I noticed the referee on NXT, there's a couple of refs out, but particularly the referee in this match was extremely vocal during the match as well. So they're adapting. It's on the fly as they go here.
One of the things about the empty arena that I saw just literally before we started recording, WWE have filed 2 trademarks over the past while. One of them, as we kind of saw, would be makes sense because you mentioned this in the previous episode, was that they've trademarked Too Big for One Night, which you might imagine against the theme of WrestleMania scenes they split it in 2.
Yeah.
The other one is for clothes and for t-shirts, a trademark saying "I wasn't there." So you're going to be able to buy your very own WrestleMania t-shirt and say, "I wasn't there," much as everybody is this year. So there you go. Fair play to them for at least having the ingenuity to do something like that.
That'll make up for it'll make up for the lost revenue of not having a crowd in Tampa Bay.
Ulster's Finest was out next then, William.
He was. The Beast of Belfast is out. Killian Dane. He was up against the former Elijah King, that people might remember from Ring of Honor, Tahuti Miles, who I think Miles has actually had very little in-ring work. He's joined WWE's production line in terms of the Performance Centre not that long ago. I think it was kind of late February, early March. Miles is basically given a chance early on. You have a feeling where this is going to go, where like Killian Dane is already kind of seen as this big imposing character and is seen as a guy who should be a big threat, definitely around the North American title scene. You get a lot of kind of running around and dancing from Miles early in the match. You get the impression he's trying to just take Killian Dane off his feet. That doesn't really happen. Then what happens is Dane catches him outside the ring, drops him onto the ring steps, bashes him up a little bit. You get a little bit of heat and a fight back from Miles, but ultimately it ends up with Dane getting a chance to go for the Vader bomb. And 1, 2, 3 pretty quickly. This is an absolute squash. I think it was only about 2.5 minutes long. And again, between the promo beforehand and the commentary, which again, I'm actually really warming to the combination of Phillips and Saxton. We talked about them on Raw on Monday as well. They did a really good job of putting across that Dane is a big threat. Again, this is a placeholder match. These are 2 guys who are just put together because there's not too many people probably around Florida who are available to fight each other. But again, Killian Dane is put across as a guy who's a threat moving forward.
Yeah, threat moving forward. It's always something that stuck out for me with him is that they need to find a catch for Killian Dane. They need to find something that sets him apart from him being a big hairy bloke, because there's a few of them at the minute. You could tell a casual viewer that he's like one of the Viking Raiders or War Raiders or whatever up on Raw, and they go, "All right, yeah, is he? Okay, yeah." He's just very much cut from that cloth, and I don't know if put with other people, give him a manager, have someone like I don't know, Malcolm Bivens of Stokely Hathaway look after him. Maybe these are their options for down the line, but I think that he just needs something. Otherwise, I think he could end up being lost in the shuffle fairly quickly.
Yeah, and look, I think when he initially moved back to NXT as well, he was kind of put into that picture with Dijakovic and Keith Lee, who've gone on to have a pretty interesting rivalry. I know we'll be talking about them in a few minutes' time as well, because they're going to be involved in the triple threat next week for the North American title as well. But at that point, Killian Dane was definitely put in their level when he directly came back. Since then, those 2 have kind of pushed on, and Killian Dane hasn't found the right dance partner yet. Yeah, it'll be interesting because a lot of the guys who potentially you could have a Killian Dane feud with are tied up in storylines elsewhere, at least for the next few weeks, because it's something I guess in a wider sense as well came across in this show is that they've had to cancel TakeOver Tampa Bay, and they've gone in an interesting direction. I kind of thought when we were talking on Tuesday what they were going to do was use this as a build-up show and effectively show the TakeOver show next week. But they seem to have been quite clever, and they've been extremely non-detail focused in saying that those matches are now going to be spread out over the next month. So I get the feeling that everything is going to be stretched out a little bit. We kind of got a bit of clarity about the women's title picture and the ladder match coming up in 2 weeks' time, and that it looks like Ciampa and Gargano will be on the card in 2 weeks' time. They made some matches for next week, but they've been very open-ended about some of the other matches that they were building towards TakeOver. So I think they've just decided, look, we're going to reset. We're not going to give everything away on one particular night, but we're going to pay off these feuds that we were playing up and probably take our time and do it over the next 4 weeks.
Yeah, which is probably fair enough. But they're in a no-win situation. They're now at the period whereby if they're booking TV, they don't know when they're going to be back in front of crowds. And you don't necessarily want to build big angles towards zero payoffs in front of crowds. Like, it's just they're in a really I actually admire them for keeping going, but it's a really difficult position that they find themselves in. Next out, Cameron Grimes and Tony Nese. I'm going to give you 2 words for Tony Nese, Will.
Go on.
Paul Roma.
Yeah.
Major bang of like power and glory, Four Horsemen WCW Paul Roma. He's like the cocky guy who keeps pointing at his abs, and you're like, oh yeah, Grant. Like he's clearly a better athlete than Paul Roma ever was, and someone say slightly more charismatic. But yeah, he's that kind of character whereby he looks impressive, can do things, has a six pack, but will get beat.
Yeah, and that's the problem. I mean, his character, and this goes back through his entire cruiserweight run. He's had the cruiserweight belt as well. Is that his abs are basically his character, and therein lies the problem.
Same,
it's like,
Will. Yeah.
He's like, I've got this really impressive body. So there's no way that he's going to be a face, because let's be fair, wrestling fans don't look like Tony Nese, and therefore he's not going to be likable. And at the same time, I think he lacks that menace as a heel as well.
Yeah.
He is a good worker. And again, this was a pretty decent match that we saw with Cameron Grimes. Again, I think they were pushing this as 50-50 booking. Both guys got quite a bit of offense in along the way. I'm really not sure about this cave-in finisher as well, Richie, that Cameron Grimes uses. I know some wrestlers are able to pull it off in terms of like a double drop kick style move, and we've got Drew McIntyre in the title picture on Raw at the moment doing so. But I always think any move where your opponent almost has to stop in order for you to do a running double leg kick looks a little bit clunky.
Yeah, I've never been a fan of the double leg kick. It actually just looks wrong. Because essentially you have to take a bump yourself to do it.
Yeah.
If you're going to do it, because you're going in double legged, you're pretty much ending up flat on your back as well, and kind of going, aren't you taking a bump at that? You should probably try and avoid being hurt even when you're doing something. Yeah, it's from a logic standpoint, it very much loses something. Cameron Grimes is one of these people again who they've had to refresh the roster there in the last 12 months, absolutely, and it was needed. But I don't know if Cameron Grimes is one of these people that he's just standard hairy bloke who looks a bit like Skinner from back in the day, and that's pretty much it. Somebody who does stand out though, boom, Io Shirai back in business.
Yeah, it's great to have her back. I mean, we thought that this was going to be Shia Lee against Aaliyah originally, and they were playing up the knee injury angle from last week as well. And then you kind of get the impression that Aaliyah has attacked Lee before the match was due to start. And we're kind of thinking, right, this is going to end up just being declared that she goes directly through to the 6-woman ladder match in a couple of weeks' time to give us a number one contender. We've not had Io Shirai around for a while. Then it's announced William Regal, I guess, in absentia, somehow got a message out to the ring. I'm not sure exactly how he did so. Maybe he's the anonymous Raw GM now at this point. But very quickly he was able to say, oh, don't worry, Io Shirai's here. And her Titantron is ready for her to walk out directly at that point as well. But again, look, Shirai comes out. She gets all of her party pieces in along the way, wins the match after a moonsault. I don't think anyone seriously would have believed that Aliyah was going to win once Io Shirai was back involved. And potentially, you've obviously got a bit of interest lined up here as well, because we remember that Io Shirai had a really good takeover match with Candice LeRae last year as well. And this ladder match basically has a nice little kind of setup of talent. If we're to assume that Rhea Ripley could well move on to the main roster at some point in the next few months. Obviously, the big match coming up at WrestleMania between herself and Charlotte Flair. But apparently, all impressions are that since pretty much Survivor Series last year, those in the main roster are very keen on getting Rhea Ripley up there as quickly as possible. So we're starting to see kind of the potential successors as the NXT Women's Champion further down the track. And I would imagine that Io Shirai, just from a purely talent point of view and an in-ring point of view, she is probably the perfect successor. The person that a lot of people probably thought before she got injured was going to be the successor to Shayna Baszler.
Yeah, they've kind of kept her strong, to be fair. I know she was hovering around the title picture, and Baszler was still very much the dominant force before Io got injured, but they kept her strong. They kept her on an undefeated streak. They didn't necessarily make too much out of it, but they always made her look like a threat to whomever she faced. And yeah, she's fantastic, like bell to bell. I don't think there are many at the moment that can actually touch her in the ring in terms of what she's do. Everything's logical. She's got charisma. She can get over in front of a crowd. I will happily see Io Shirai take the mantle of the champion of that division for the next while. And how she gets there is actually going to be really, really interesting to watch.
Yeah, and I'm actually really looking forward to that ladder match. We'll talk obviously about the next qualifier a little bit later on, but it's shaping up to be an interesting match. And generally, NXT put on really good women's matches when they go to this kind of takeover level particularly. And I think that's one of the things we can look forward to over the next 3 or 4 weeks. Like, while this show felt a little bit weird and a little bit fillery, and that's kind of strange when this should have been more like a build-up show, I think it has put a lot of things in motion for potentially an interesting next 3 or 4 weeks. And this women's title picture, definitely the far side of WrestleMania, particularly when we find out who's won between Charlotte and Ripley, is going to be quite an interesting chase as well.
Yeah, Keith Lee is somebody who stood out over the course of the last 12 months, I guess, at the moment, and especially seeing as it seems like, in a weird way, when I think about him at the moment, I kind of think about where Austin found himself in '97. I'm not saying there's any similarity with their characters whatsoever. I'm just purely talking about positioning, whereby Keith Lee is over to a degree that is beyond like being the North American champion in NXT, similarly to when Austin was like red hot and he was still only Intercontinental champion and only winning it at SummerSlam '97, you remember, against Owen Hart after having his neck broke. Yeah. But like, you're kind of going, surely he would have been higher up the card by then. And you're kind of thinking the same with Keith Lee. And I'm sure there's reasons, they're taking their time, he's going to get there. But like, bags of charisma, absolute mountain of a man, and can do anything between the ropes. He's superstar, absolute superstar.
Yeah, my suspicion on this one, Rich, would have been like post Survivor Series, where they booked him extremely strong and where effectively he shows he's the equal of Roman Reigns, and then he goes into the Royal Rumble and he gets respect from Brock at a time when Brock was just eliminating person after person after person. It's very clear that his fans are there further up the line in terms of WWE creative. I wonder if they kept him around, and particularly they put the North American belt on him, and not long after his impressive showings, that they wanted to just have him here to potentially have a payoff, I guess, to the feud between him and Dijakovic at TakeOver. And now we're seeing the TakeOver match is unlikely to happen, so they've mixed Damian Priest into this as well. I'm just wondering if Damian Priest being added into the three-way on the back of this match, which Keith Lee, this promo where Keith Lee was involved with the two guys, I wonder if maybe Damian Priest is involved here to take the pin so Dijakovic can take the title from Keith Lee in a couple of weeks' time.
Yeah, you often see that with like a triple threat. Someone's added in so you can kind of keep somebody else strong along the way. And I don't know, but I've heard that Priest is well thought of in terms of where they want him to go within the next 12 months as well. So it's actually, there's a bit of intrigue to see which way that could go. The fact that Dijakovic, who's standing tall at the end of it, suggests that maybe he's probably going to end up being bested next time out. But I guess we still have that level of intrigue.
We do. And look, I think, again, not too dissimilar to Keith Lee, Dijakovic is really good for a big guy in terms of moving around. I'm definitely ready for those two to move away from each other. It feels like this has been going on for, God, about a year now at this stage. So both definitely have big futures. I think I haven't bought into Damian Priest yet, to be honest. I think it's his character more so than anything else that I haven't really enjoyed. But we'll see what happens. I mean, you could easily have this break off into a feud where it's Priest against Dijakovic if Lee is to move on after this. And a bit like you, I think Lee doesn't need to actually necessarily go into the title picture in NXT. I think there's no need for him to chase after Adam Cole once he finishes as North American champion. I think he's definitely ready to go to Raw or SmackDown.
Yeah, Adam Cole, you mentioned there, he files video from his holiday, always something that I enjoy. Shawn Michaels Jr., as we see him here, he's addressing Velveteen Dream. He was clearly flustered by initially, but now says Dream is a loser. He says the Dream hasn't proven himself, so Cole sets up a match between Velveteen Dream and Bobby Fish to give a chance to show what he's worth. Again, this shows the power of factions. You're able to use other people to kind of do your bidding and make somebody else kind of wait towards getting to the leader of the pack, as it were. But yeah, I guess just a biding time kind of segment.
Yeah, absolutely. Quite interesting that obviously this is shot wonderfully, cheap production wise. That this is literally Adam Cole shooting a promo down into his mobile phone, because you can see it in his his sunglasses while he's doing the promo. I'm guessing this is legit. Adam Cole probably sitting by his pool at the moment, enjoying himself and enjoying this breakaway where he doesn't need to be in the empty Full Sail University. Yeah, again, it's handy that this has happened so many times with the Undisputed Era, where Adam Cole will say, "All right, you want to go with me? Go through Roderick Strong or go through through, Bobby Fish particularly. They tend to kind of keep Kyle O'Reilly for the tag team stuff. And I actually think that Dream against Fish could be a pretty decent match next week. It's going to probably fill out the card among some of the other kind of title-based matches that are going to take place. You can only assume the Velveteen Dream is going to do what many people have done beforehand, which is work their way through the Stooges within the Undisputed Era to finally get a match against Adam Cole. I do wonder, Richie, I don't know how you feel about this, how much longer there is of the Undisputed Era inside NXT. I'm not sure they're that well set up in terms of talent coming through. They seem to have bought every independent contract possible over the last year, so they have a lot of people on their books, over 200 wrestlers at WWE at the moment. But I think if the Undisputed Era were to leave, I'm not sure there's necessarily a main event group ready to step in to fill the void if they were to move up.
No, there's beyond the top tier of talent there at the moment in the men's division, in particular in NXT. There is a charisma black hole beneath that. I mean, you've got Riddle and Keith Lee, then you've got Velveteen Dream, Undisputed Era, and
Pete Dunne probably.
That's the thing. I wouldn't even like Pete Dunne's a fine worker. Pete Dunne's great for what he does, but I don't think he's not a talker. No. You need somebody else beside him who can, chat away a bit more than he can, which is why Riddle in that role was actually great with the two of them. But yeah, like you're going. Do you want to hear a Damian Priest promo? Do you want to hear a Dijakovic promo? Do you want to hear a promo from I don't know, Killian Dane even? Like, not really.
No.
And they're not somebody you'd sit there and watch and kind of go, oh yeah, he's cool. In this kind of way that young kids might. I don't know. I'm not going to say they're in trouble. They've got loads of people that can help them out, and they've got the best setup imaginable down there. I just think they need to be a bit more selective in terms of who they're actually pushing. Again, they can probably recycle people, take people back down from SmackDown and repurpose them, I guess, as we saw with Finn Balor for one. I think that might be a route that might be worth exploring for them, at least to try and get them over the hump of people like Keith Lee being called up over the next while.
Yeah, look, I can understand why they pushed to try and get Matt Hardy to sign a contract to go to NXT. And apparently the talk was that if he went to NXT, they'd allow him to do his broken Hardy stuff while he was there. They very clearly need someone to come in the main event picture. We'll talk about him a little bit later on. We finally got the reveal that Killer Kross is going to NXT as opposed to going to Raw or SmackDown. I think all the talk was that he was going directly to the main roster. Apparently that was the promise that was made when there was a huge amount of contracts being thrown his way. I guess Killer Kross comes in now potentially to take on Ciampa or Gargano at the end of their feud as well. So maybe that'll bolster
a good addition in terms of being able to cut a promo and being able to be a bit of a star presence in that division as well. It's not a bad sign. Speaking of star presence, Vic and Thorne. A huge week.
The boys are back.
Aussie mates, our boys, Brent and Vic and Shane Thorne, getting their arses beaten again. This time by Danny Burch and Oney Lorcan. Oney Lorcan, who I thought had left the company about 6 months ago, turns out he hasn't. He's gotten another tag match with Danny Burch. Two people I actually really enjoy. I think they're fantastic little workers inside the ring. They're especially Oney Lorcan's a decent follow in all caps on Twitter. So yeah, nice to see them out. Another win for Birch and Lorcan, and the two lads getting their arses handed to them in quick style. But I guess it's nice to work on TV twice in a week if you're in that kind of position.
And unfortunately, that's exactly what Phillips and Saxton got across when they were talking during commentary as well. It was like, oh my God, what an opportunity for these guys to wrestle twice in a week. It's kind of like, well, I got a feeling where this is going. It's very rare when you see Birch and Lorcan actually win a match as well. And when the double submission got locked in, I kind of thought they're probably still going to let the Aussie guys get a win this week, aren't they? And then the match finished pretty quickly as well. Again, like I think when they signed Shane Thorne, the talk was that maybe he might get pushed up a little bit along the way, and then he got romantically involved, I think, with Alexa Bliss at one point as well, and you're kind of thinking maybe he'll get moved to Raw, but it's very clear that these two guys are right down towards the bottom of the card, and the reason that they have worked twice this week is obviously they live in Orlando, and were able to make it to the Performance Center, and then we're able to make it to Full Sail.
At time of recording, apparently the Performance Center is closed due to the coronavirus. There's a no leave home issue out in the local county. So yeah, it seems as if they might be waiting to find somewhere to record TV over the next while. It might have to be done in Vince's palatial back garden.
It's a good thing they got some of WrestleMania tape then, isn't it, Richie? Apparently they've got quite a few bits done.
I think they've got it mostly done, and if they haven't, by God, they're in trouble now. Sixth match of the night. In fairness to them, they did give us a lot of in-ring action this week.
Which is a nice contrast to Raw, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Caden Carter this time in the latest qualifier to be part of a 6-woman ladder match to decide who's going to be the number one contender to whoever beats Rhea Ripley and Charlotte Flair. It's a convoluted system. I can kind of see the reasoning for it, but again, there's too many steps involved in this. But another decent outing by Candice LeRae, somebody who's, I don't want to say wasted, but she came into the division with a massive reputation and she's been people's friend the whole way along and hasn't really stood out on her own.
And as the people turn on her, she kind of, we're talking about Sting earlier, she kind of suffers from the Sting side of things, which is she'll become friends with anybody. She'll be friends with them and be the most loyal friend you can possibly get. And then that person will realise at some point that they need to shed her in order to go for the belt. And
which just makes her look incredibly stupid as a character. Like somebody, I was listening to Between the Sheets earlier and they were talking about 94 and there was an issue between Sting and Rick Rude, and Rude had this long running thing whereby he'd go and sign autographs for people and women would come up to him and give him kisses in the crowd and all this, and he'd do the autograph thing, and one of them was a plant by Sting who used carbon paper will
nice.
To get Rude to sign a contract to agree to a match with Sting. And you're like, yes, that makes Sting look like a clever man, not a stupid man that he has been for so long. And the same thing with Candice LeRae. She's nice, she's smiley, she can do it from bell to bell. She's obviously married to Gargano, but you just, as a character, you just make her look so naive and thick. And maybe if you want that, that's fair enough, but there seems to be more than that to her there.
Yeah, it's a small thing, but I don't like that she has the same finisher as her husband. Like, I think she just needs something slightly different to make her stand out. Look, I know she can win using the Lion Salt as well, and in this case, they kind of gave us a half-false finish because it seemed like she was going to get the Lion Salt, then that got countered, and then she was able to lock in her submission after that. But I just think, she needs a striking finish of some form that's not just, hey, look, I'm Johnny Gargano's wife.
Yeah, so she won it. Obviously, I don't think there's going to be any debate about whether she got to get through this match or not. So in that ladder match for 2 weeks' time, we have Io Shirai, Candice LeRae, Tegan Nox, Chelsea Green, Mia Yim, and one other. It kind of shows the depth of the women's roster. That's like fantastic depth at the minute there that they have. Like Mia Yim is another person who, if they wanted to just put the burners on her, she could absolutely go and be one of these dominant figures. She can talk. She's got a bit of charisma about her. So yeah, like it's a fantastic division they've cultivated for themselves there. And the winners, we know, will go on and face Charlotte or Rhea Ripley after WrestleMania. Matt Riddle then, the No Shoes Wonder, taking on Roderick Strong. A pretty decent match this to finish out the show, to be fair, for a show that kind of it lacked a bit of heat during the course of it. But this was a very good match. And Riddle is somebody who, I don't want to see him stay there too long. He seems like somebody, obviously he's angling himself for people like Lesnar and for people like Willie Goldberg. But yeah, that you would imagine it doesn't go over too well with the people who would make decisions about those matches. So you kind of figure he'll be left paddling here for a while, unfortunately.
Yeah, apparently that's what happened at the Royal Rumble, according to pretty much all the reports coming out that were effectively there was unhappiness in WWE that previously Riddle had tried to start an argument with Bill Goldberg, and they don't like the idea in WWE, and I can kind of understand this, where it's like, do not try and create a feud which you know is not going to be paid off on TV, because the fans will see this on Twitter, and straight away they will assume that you're actually setting up a genuine match against Bill Goldberg. That's not going to happen. Then he decided to go down the Lesnar route of things. Riddle comes into the Royal Rumble, and to be fair, I actually thought he got a really big reaction. People seem to really enjoy him, even outside of Full Sail, because sometimes you get a big reaction at Full Sail because a lot of the same people go continually. But at the Royal Rumble, there was a huge pop when he came out. He was in the ring for a few seconds and then gets thrown out very, very quickly. So I think that was definitely felt like a punishment toward him. But in NXT, and definitely in terms of what Triple H has been doing, I get the impression this is a guy who he knows he can rely on to have a really good match. Like Matt Riddle was an indie darling before he made the move to NXT, and it was very clear when you see himself and Roderick Strong. When I saw the mention at the top of the card that these two guys were going to main event, you knew you were going to get a good match, because Roderick Strong is probably the workhorse within NXT at the moment, and he knew that Matt Riddle was going to give him a really good match as well. The rest of the matches I thought across the night felt kind of bitty, with the exception of maybe the first two. And this is the first one that I had a feel of being an actual match with some kind of consequence, because Riddle has had plenty of run-ins with the Undisputed Era. It's a very easy story to tell that Riddle dislikes them, just in a general sense. What did feel a bit strange as well, and again I suppose this is down to the fact that people aren't available to actually travel, and it was a story I think they didn't explain very well, was that Pete Dunne is not there, and it was kind of like travel complications, and there's nobody there from the Undisputed Era.
And they don't, the thing about it is, it's this weird, stupid bubble that they live in. They don't address the fact that there is the coronavirus
Pandemic.
pandemic.
Yeah.
Like they've done it on AEW Dynamite, and that's fair enough. And they kind of make mention of it. They can make light of it in different ways that are appropriate. But here they're just like their travelers. Like he wasn't able to make. You're like going, just fucking say why you're not having WrestleMania there.
Yeah,
just
say he's in England and he can't make it across because of travel restrictions. That's fine. Why are the Undisputed not here? Kyle O'Reilly is actually, and Bobby Fischer actually on holidays with Adam Cole at the moment. Because it seems weird, because just the way their characters work, there is no way that O'Reilly and Fish wouldn't have come down and got involved in this match some way if they were backstage.
It's silliness. We eventually see Riddle getting the win, but I guess that's not the story of the match, because we get 2 debuts.
We do, yeah. And what was kind of strange is I had to go directly to the internet to go, who are these 2 guys who are beating them
I can
up?
see the way they're different fonts that you posted them into the notes is kind of from a copy and paste. Yeah,
I had to legitimately look them up.
And Rinku Singh.
Like, again, look, it's 2 foreign heels who are coming into the ring to beat up Matt Riddle. Why are they doing so? And then out comes their manager.
Yeah, in fairness, I'm delighted that Malcolm Bivens, the artist formerly known as Stokely Hathaway, is getting some shine and getting something to do, because he'd been twiddling his thumbs there for a while, doing his own online little things while signed to the company. But like, for anybody who saw his work before in Ring of Honor or in Evolve, like one of the best talkers in the business, very kind of Johnny Cochran vibe off him is what you might get. Kind of very smart, very sharp, can cut a promo on anybody, and makes blokes like Singh and Gurjar look huge. I mean, initially I kind of saw a picture of the 2 of them together before I watched the show, and they looked like, massive gods next to Stokely, Malcolm Bivens. And you see them then with Riddle, you're kind of like, oh, they're kind of average, well, not average size, but like about 6'4", 6'5", but they look like they're about 7 foot tall next to Bivens. And that's the genius of having a manager like that. Someone small who looks like they can get their ass kicked but can talk anybody into a match. Just great stuff to see him doing his thing.
It'd be interesting to see whether Stokely ends up involved as an in-ring wrestler as well, because his message he kind of left after Riddle was left in the ring was that I'm the future of the tag team division. Not quite sure if he means, right, my 2 boys are going to be the future and they're the guys who are going to go after you guys' titles, or whether it's the case of I'm going to get actively involved myself. I guess they've left that intrigue open for the next few weeks. I would imagine we're going to end up in an awkward scenario where if, as I kind of assume, Pete Dunne is actually in the UK as opposed to being in America, it could be quite a few weeks before Pete Dunne gets back. So I'm just wondering if maybe this could be written off as a supposed injury for Matt Riddle, that he won't be able to get involved for the next 3 or 4 weeks. It's a very cozy way of not having to defend your NXT titles.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd imagine that's something they're going to go down. Just say that there's a bloody virus, for God's sake. Yeah. WWE, you idiots. Anyway, Ciampa and Gargano essentially we finish off with promos to headline both shows, which is the weird thing.
Yeah, and in this one you've got Triple H in full Daddy Triple H mode now. At this stage, it's not even corporate Triple H. It's the Triple H who is the head of NXT that's coming out to speak, and he's very sincere that he's annoyed at both men for destroying the Performance Center, which might very well be a good excuse if the Performance Center is locked down. What happened? Oh, that brawl between the 2 guys a couple of weeks ago has closed the Performance Center.
They're finally taking note from that. Was it IWA fight in the mid 2000s? Was it Punk and Chris Hero?
Yeah,
had a battle in a barn that was essentially going to be used for the last time, so they just like knocked the shit out of it. Yeah. We're taking liberties. So it's like, yeah, they've actually destroyed the Performance Center, much like the Hurricane in the Wizard of Oz.
Which just it just comes across so strange as well, because now Triple H is like, we're going to have a match not next week because I need a week to find a venue for this to actually take place, and once I find an empty building, you guys are going to fight in an empty building, and only one of you is ever going to come back to NXT. So yeah, it's kind of strange. As we said at the outset, I mean, they're telling, I think, a very clear story at this point, which is, right, we've had our setbacks in trying to pay off the breakdown of DIY. We got stopped by the neck injury last year. We're going to make sure that this finishes. Coronavirus doesn't mean we can actually drag this out any longer. And I think a lot of the fizzle has gone out of this feud as well. Like, it was interesting to see Gargano turn heel and to cost Ciampa the match against Adam Cole at the last takeover.
Yeah, because it's something different that we haven't seen in the feud before. Yeah,
but ultimately, how many flips and changes have we had between Ciampa and Gargano now? And it is a little bit undermined as well when you see how often they've gone back to tag together. it's a feud that should have ended a year ago. And I'll just be glad if we get a good match to finish this out. I've no doubt they will, because they've put on 5-star matches previously. Again, it's a pity it's not playing out in front of a crowd. I actually think this is one of those matches that would have probably worked well on the WrestleMania card, even if they'd moved it outside of NXT TakeOver. But unfortunately for them, it's not playing out that way, and we might never get the satisfying conclusion. But if they do set up a match in a building, whatever the hell it's going to be, and an empty ring somewhere, I think they can actually have a decent payoff and a decent match. And I'll be happy enough once we have a conclusion and an overall winner, who I assume at this point it is moving very much towards being a face, Tommaso Ciampa, who I would think gets back involved in the title picture with Adam Cole directly after this, and Gargano goes off for pastures new.
We get an ending of the show then with Killer Kross up in the Titantron. He's most definitely coming to NXT. We say I think we're both in agreement that's going to be a benefit to the show.
I think so, yeah. I mean, it was half hinted that it could be a move to SmackDown initially, particularly when those Mustafa Ali bits were playing in the background and the glitching that was happening. The idea was that maybe Killer Kross would go directly there, fueled a lot by the fact that a lot of the wrestling journalists were saying that Killer Kross was signed up to a deal to go directly to the main roster. He had no interest in stopping off in NXT first, and he did look ready-made, given his profile in other promotions, that he actually is ready to go directly in. But I think NXT is probably the right way to go. They need someone in there, particularly. I think he'll come in, no doubt, with a heel character, and he adds an extra layer of menace at the top if you want to elevate some people up in the face division. NXT is a little bit lacking of heels in general, I think, towards the top. Even the fact that they've had to flip both Gargano and Finn Balor in recent months just to create people who are there. The fact that they're not able to bring Ringkampf over to maybe have Walter there as a real threat on the main roster as well. They needed to bring someone in, and so from that point of view, I think Killer Kross is a really good signing. To me, I thought AEW seemed the obvious move for him, but it's NXT's gain with this big signing.
Yeah, that'll just about wrap it up for our second edition of Off the Top Rope here on your regular Off the Ball channels. Thank you so much for joining us, Will. Thank you for pressing the record button on that end.
I sure hope it's still recording. I haven't checked. If this podcast goes up, it means that I have successfully recorded it. And I don't know whether I'm going to watch SmackDown tomorrow night. I might hold off on that. I think we're obviously doing this on the fly at the moment as well, as much as these companies. And I would think we probably might hold off and do one podcast next week, maybe same day, maybe next Thursday. And we'll wrap up what happens in SmackDown and Raw as well. Because I just get that feeling, even just looking at SmackDown, we're going to see more Gronk for your sins this week as well. I just get the feeling we're going to have another placeholder as we build towards that WrestleMania double card. So I think we'll be able to wrap them up a bit quicker. But I've enjoyed our first week. It's the most wrestling I've watched in a week in a long, long time.
Yeah. Same here. We are, of course, open to suggestions as well. I know a couple of people online have already made the suggestion that we delve back into the annals of time and go through stuff. The thing about that is I fear that it's been done a little bit. The OSW review lads have obviously made legitimately a career out of that kind of thing, and fair play to them. And others have gone down the retro route as well. But I guess, like, I'm tempted to put WrestleMania 8 back in front of, or is it SummerSlam? No, SummerSlam 92 in front of Nathan again and see what he makes of it, because he watched that initially, he said, outside of a TV shop in Ballyhonus back in 1992.
Ballyhonus at a TV shop?
He had to make an arrangement whereby it would be left on and he was able to sit outside the window and watch it.
At 1 o'clock in the morning?
No, it was because it was on.
It was the Wembley one. Yeah,
so
of course.
Like regular time.
3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, yeah.
Yeah, so there you go. We'll try and figure out what a way we can get Nathan in front of SummerSlam 92 and maybe bring that to you at some stage. But yeah, we'll work out the kinks in this. By all means, let us know what you think of these things. If you're still watching, by all means, we'd love to hear from you. You can get in contact with us the regular way. But for now, thanks so much for tuning in.